2 months ago, YouTube user Adam SmartThings left a comment on one of my videos saying, I wonder if one could also fully oil paint a figure to look like the heavy metal style, with strong separations between parts, high contrast edge highlights, etc. Well, Adam SmartThings, be careful what you wish for, because today we're gonna do exactly that. I'll attempt to paint the heavy metalist of figures, a Space Marine from the Ultramarine chapter. And before we get started, I want to let you know that there is a 50-minute edit of this video available to my patrons over on Patreon. So if you're interested in seeing the full video, go ahead and check that out through the link in the description. All right, let's get started with the Space Marine. We start off with the model primed black, and from here, we'll base coat the entire model with blue. You can use any blue paint for this as long as it's matte. I used the phthalo blue from Chimera, but feel free to use any blue paint you have available. We want to make sure that we have a nice matte surface for the oil paints to latch onto when we pull those out. Then I'll come in with an oil wash. This is a mix of Prussian blue and thinner in roughly a 50-50 ratio. I'll wash the whole model with this mixture before coming in with a Q-tip and removing much of the excess of the wash. You can of course use a makeup sponge for this, which I recommend. I just used a Q-tip because I didn't have any makeup sponges lying around. The reason for covering the entire model in the wash is that we can leave some of the wet paint in the recesses and shadow areas of the model. This is going to stain our mixed tones with some of that deeper, darker tone. So this will help us to get a smooth, saturated shadow color. Transparent colors like Prussian blue are especially good for these purposes. With the dark Prussian blue color still in the recesses and shadow areas, we can start to add some mid-tones to the mix. Here, I'm coming in with some ultramarine blue and placing this in the areas where I know I want the light. So that will be on the top of the shapes and on the edges. I'm not worried about putting down nice, beautiful brush strokes. All of that blending and finish is going to come later. Now I'm just slapping on the paint. Blending these together, I decide that the ultramarine is a bit too dark, so I start to introduce some cobalt turquoise into the mix. After all, we do need that high contrast. With a clean brush, I'll come in and massage the different parts of the paint together. This makes for seamless, beautiful, smooth blends. The most important thing when doing this is to make sure that you're keeping your blending brush relatively clean. It's very easy to pick up some pigment with the blending brush and then carry that over to another part of the model where you don't necessarily want that color. So I make sure to wipe the blending brush on a clean paper towel very often as I do this. Oh yeah, let me know in the comments if there are any other chapters you'd like to see painted in this way. Once I'm done blending these two layers together, I'll come in with some brighter paints and start to put that down. It really is that simple. Put on some paint, blend it, put on some more paint, and blend it until you're happy. With this brighter mix, we're really starting to show the volumes. The cylinders on the legs get these smaller lines of light, and the spheres on the head as well as the shoulder pads gets these rounded highlights. The cylinders on the legs are also getting various reflections and some weaker and stronger highlights in them. This varying brightness helps to make the armor look more shiny. I'm also looking to establish some of the edge highlights, as this edge highlight really is important for the style that we're going for and to create the necessary separation between the different elements. So edge highlights all over the model and spherical highlights on the face, the shoulders, and the backpack. And even though there are a lot of small details that are getting edge highlights, I really hope that you can see how simple it is to follow the rules of these volumes. Before we continue, I want to take a quick break and tell you about a really cool place that I know. It's called Patreon, and on there you can see extended versions of all of my videos, get personalized feedback or individual coaching. And just as I mentioned earlier, there's also a 50-minute edit of this video that you can watch. You'll also get to sleep at night knowing that you're supporting me in my passion and my dream about making more of these painting videos for you to watch. Does that sound interesting to you? Well, if it does, be sure to click the link in the description and check out the Patreon page. I am incredibly thankful for the people who have signed up, and it means so much to me that you would want to support me in my work. So thank you, members. And if you are not already a member, I hope to see you over there. If not, I hope at least you'll consider supporting me by clicking the like button and maybe even subscribing to my YouTube channel. It helps out a lot, so thank you, and let's get back to the video. When blending in this brighter layer, it really is important not to overdo the blending steps and to brighten up the shadows with the highlights. Since the model is so small, we want to take special care not to rub some of the edge highlights off into the shadows or midtones of other areas. If it does happen though, we can always pick up some of the previous tones and come back in and fix our mistakes. Because everything stays wet and workable, we're in no rush to try to fix our mistakes. In fact, it's quite often throughout a paint job that I discover some small errors that I can fix along the way. Once the first layer of highlights is blended, it's time to come in with our brightest lights. This is a 50-50 mix of cobalt turquoise and titanium white. And this is really where the painting starts to shine. I try to always cover a smaller layer and really focus in on those edge highlights with this. You may also notice that I'm concentrating this light more towards the top of the Space Marine. This really helps to pull the focus towards the face and the shoulders, which I think is the most important part of the miniature. Once this brightest layer of highlights is put down, I know that I can't squeeze much more contrast into this first layer of oils. So I'll have to wait for this to dry and come back in with the mixes once again. For the gold parts, I'm adding a few new colors to the palette. Burnt umber, Indian yellow, and a little bit of cadmium lemon as well. I'll start by mixing some of the burnt umber with the Prussian blue to get a dark shadow color for the gold. The Indian yellow on its own is a lovely, rich, saturated mid-tone for the gold. And cadmium lemon, along with a little bit of titanium white, is gonna make for some nice highlights. I'm trying to focus the brightest lights towards the tip of the wings and the top of the skull on the chest. For the trim on the shoulder pad, I'm trying to place the brightest lights next to where I have the highlights that we're seeing on the shoulder pad. And of course, I'm trying to build a bit of an edge highlight here as well, but we'll see that more clearly in the second layer. So it's been a day or two since I put down this first painting session with the oils, and the paint is now dry. And though you could certainly leave the miniature here, I would like to try to push the contrast a little bit more to show you what's possible with the oils. And maybe you can also see how the painting seems a bit more dim, the shadows are not quite as dark, and the highlights are not quite as bright as they were when the paint was wet. I'll start by adding a pin line wash. This is to try to get some darkness and some separation between the different elements back in. And this is the same mixture of dilutant and Prussian blue that we used for the wash in the beginning. I'll then paint in some pure Prussian blue into the shadow tones of the model to try to create some more saturated shadows, before coming in with our brightest lights and trying to mix these two together. So in this second layer, we're really working with both ends of the contrast spectrum. On one hand, we're darkening the shadows, and on the other hand, we're brightening the lights. Painting the edge highlights on a dry surface really is in some ways easier. It's simply easier to achieve that radical jump in contrast on a dry surface where the paint doesn't mix with what's already there. For the gold, I'm working with brightening the highlights with the cadmium lemon and the titanium white. And in some select areas, I'm saturating the midtones with the Indian yellow. I really like the shadows that I had in the gold already, and I didn't want to try to create this perfect gradient in these very small elements. I thought the specular highlights here were the most important to sell the effect of the non-metallic metal gold. From there, I varnished the model once everything is nice and dry. It really takes no more than a day or two, especially when working with these blue pigments. They're all quite fast in their drying time, but your mileage may vary depending on your pigments and environment, so just be sure to give it a few extra days if you're in doubt. I'm really happy with how the Space Marine came out. I certainly think that we managed to create a heavy metal style paint job using only oils. Do you agree? Let me know in the comments below. I could also easily imagine doing an episode 2 of this video where we can talk a bit about doing some weathering, some freehands, and the basing for the model. If this video does well, maybe I'll make that. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Do feel free to check out my socials for the links in the description. And until next time, Happy painting.